Welcome to the local campaign, and thank you for joining us on Rogers TV. Our debate today is for the riding of Ottawa West-Nepean. We have four candidates here who are going to debate the issues, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. But first, the rules for the debate today. We are going to start with opening statements of 1 minute in length. Each of the candidates will have an opportunity to speak directly to you, the voters of Ottawa West-Nepean. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random just before we began our telecast. After the opening statements, we're going to move into a series of questions about the important issues in Ottawa West-Nepean and throughout the province of Ontario. In each case, I'll start the discussion by directing a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to respond to that question, and then we'll open it up to several minutes of debate and discussion on that issue amongst all the candidates. After that debate has concluded, we will go back to the candidate to whom the question was originally directed, and he or she will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. Once we've been through several different debate topics, we'll wrap up with closing statements. They will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. So let's meet the candidates who are here for our debate in the riding of Ottawa West-Nepean. First, the Progressive Conservative candidate, Jeremy Roberts. Chandra Pasma is the NDP candidate. The Green Party candidate is Patrick Friel, and representing the Liberal Party is Bob Chiarelli. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
There are three candidates who are also seeking your vote in Ottawa West-Nepean on June the 7th who are not with us for the debate today. They include the Trillium Party candidate, Mark Blais, the Libertarian Party representative, Nicholas Paliga, and Colin Pritchard of the None of the Above Party. So let's get to the opening statements. Again, they're 1 minute in length, and we're going to start with Jeremy Roberts of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Roberts, and I am your Ontario PC candidate here in Ottawa West-Nepean. Tonight, I'd like to start by asking our viewers at home a very simple question. Are you satisfied with the Kathleen Wynne government, or are you looking for a change? If the answer is change, you are definitely not alone. As I have gone around the riding over the past 2 years and gone door to door, I am hearing from hundreds of people who are dissatisfied on a number of different issues. Firstly, on spending. This government is spending far too much. Secondly, taxes. Between hydro rates and taxes, people are feeling the pinch. And third, our services are continuing to decline and not keep up to par with other jurisdictions. We're going to hear those visions. I look forward to presenting our Ontario PC vision to you tonight.
Thank you. Next is Chandra Pasma, who is the NDP candidate. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chandra Pasma, and I'm your NDP candidate in Ottawa West-Nepean. As I've been knocking on doors across Ottawa West-Nepean the past few months, I keep hearing the same things everywhere I go. People are tired of the cynical, broken promises of the Liberals. They're tired of the mismanagement and scandals. But they're also scared that Doug Ford's cuts will only make things worse. Thankfully, this election, you don't need to choose between bad and worse. The NDP We will cut your hydro bill by up to 30%. We will make sure that you and your family get the prescription drugs and dental care that you need. We will make childcare more affordable, and we will repair our crumbling schools. Because after 15 years of government neglecting the things that matter most to people, you deserve a government that fights hard for you every single day. And with Andrea Horwath and the NDP, that's what you will get.
Thank you. Patrick Friel is the Green Party candidate. Go ahead with your opening statement.
Thanks, Mark. I'm a fifth-generation Ottawa citizen. I'm a graduate of the Catholic School Board, and I'm an alumni of the Algonquin College Environmental Science Program. I'm still in school studying horticulture industries, and I'm completing my co-op with a small landscaping company called Canton's Mindful Gardens. I've achieved a 5-year career working at McDonald's, the last 3 of those years working as a manager and chair of the restaurant's Joint Health and Safety Committee, where I've overseen, where I've really developed my skills as a role model and leader. I chose the Green Party because the Green Party believes in strong fiscal policies, has the best plan for the environment, and has a true dedication to the people. I want to thank all the candidates for coming out tonight and being a part of this excellent show of democracy, although I hope we can all agree on the need to improve the electoral system to meet the needs of changing issues and a diverse population.
All right, thank you. Finally, the opening statement from the Liberal Party candidate, Bob Chiarelli.
Thank you, Mark and Rogers TV, for hosting us today. I want to tell you what we've been doing since we took office. On healthcare, we have among the shortest wait times in Canada, and that is a verified fact. And the following is just some of what we have built. A new Royal Ottawa Hospital bringing mental health services into the 21st century here in Ottawa. A new cancer treatment centre in our community at the Queensway Carleton Hospital to bring challenging treatments closer to home. Our world-renowned Heart Institute with a major addition with new technology and operating rooms, and major additions to every Ottawa hospital. And we recently committed funding to a new children's treatment centre at CHEO for children with complex disabilities, and to build a new civic hospital campus. Our government has and continues to build 21st century healthcare that matters for Ottawa and Ontario.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are now going to move into some debates on the important topics in Ottawa West-Nepean and throughout the city of Ottawa and the province of Ontario. I'll start with a question to Jeremy Roberts, the Progressive Conservative Party candidate. Doug Ford, your leader, has said that he doesn't agree with supervised injection sites, but medical experts, particularly here in Ottawa, say they save lives. So would you support a mobile supervised injection site for Ottawa? And what else would you do to address the opioid crisis?
Sure, absolutely. That's a fantastic question, Mark, and it's something that's incredibly important across Ottawa. I had the chance recently to meet with a group called We the Parents, who are a group of parents who've come together to try and tackle this ongoing fentanyl crisis that's plaguing our city. And this is a particularly big issue here in Ottawa West-Nepean, with areas of our riding, Bayshore, Caldwell, different areas like that that are seeing increased gang violence and issues related to drugs. I want to be very clear. Doug Ford has said that while he is not supportive, he is open to considering the idea. I personally am supportive of anything that can help get this issue on track in the right direction, and I'll be fighting for that with Mr. Ford.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on that topic.
This is something that has reached crisis proportions in our province, and I think it deserves a response that is in proportion to that crisis. And that's why the NDP is going to create a dedicated Ministry of Mental Health and for the opioid crisis, so that we're not working across multiple departments with a scattered kind of response, but we have a very strategic and connected response. And I'm wondering if that's something you would support as well, Jeremy.
Well, so actually, what we've actually committed to in terms of a PC government is we're going to invest $1.9 billion over the next couple of years in mental health funding, which is going to be matched by the federal government for a total of $3.8 billion. And that's going to help both mental health issues and addiction issues. One of the things that I think we really need to do is we need to consolidate the services for our young people across the city. There's a fantastic move right now to consolidate services at CHEO under the One Door for Care policy, and I think that's something that we absolutely have to get behind and ensure that we're supporting, so that these families that are dealing with these crises have some place to go. Because that's the biggest thing I've heard from parents, is that when their child is facing an addictions crisis, they go to the hospital. They don't know what to do. They might go to their local representative. They don't know what to do. They might go to a doctor's office. They don't know what to do. We need to find a way to make sure that when they are in a crisis situation, there is an accessible one door available for them. And that's something I'm going to support and make sure that our Ontario PC party is fighting to support.
I definitely agree with Mr. Roberts in the sense that the opioid crisis is a huge issue, not only in Ottawa, but also in Ottawa West-Nepean. Just last Sunday, I was partaking in a community cleanup around the Pinecrest Creek on the intersection of Baseline and Woodruff. Some of my volunteers actually found used hypodermic needles along the creek. So I am in 100% support with my colleague Chandra here in establishing a Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. That way, the Green Party actually plans on investing $6 billion in mental health services so that people with mental health issues can get the support that they need. We would find this $6 billion by integrating reports found in the 2012 Drummond Report to try to prevent tax evasion and, yes.
I just have one question for Jeremy, though. I absolutely agree that we need to take a strategic approach here, and we need to support our hospitals so that they're ready when people walk in and we have the space to deal with that. But Doug Ford has said he's going to cut 4%, $6 billion across the board. That's a 4% cut from healthcare. when our healthcare system is already under extreme stress. So what are you going to take away from our healthcare system that's
gonna
going to
actually
allow you to
interject and
spend
add.
and support people in that way?
If you can, Patrick, I'll just respond quickly because it's a very easy answer, Chandra. If you've listened to Doug Ford and our PC team, you are hearing exactly the opposite to that. Doug Ford has committed that as we work towards the important goal of balancing our budget, we are not going to cut a single penny from healthcare. We are going to, in fact, continue to grow
on this
healthcare.
issue, people are dying. Doug Ford says he wants to think about it. That's not good enough here. Okay? If you go from community to community to community, they want to do harm reduction. They want to save people's lives. And he just can't avoid it. He's not on side with one of the most important things challenging civil society these days.
I just need to come back
And
to
what
this
we
a
have
moment,
done,
though.
we've put a very comprehensive strategy in place, thanks to Eric Hoskins. We're expanding access to naloxone, a life-saving drug that can temporarily reverse an opioid overdose, and people are being saved every day. We're the first province in Canada to develop an overdose prevention sites program, with first approved site in London. I'll be very happy to talk about mental illness as we get into this debate, but at this particular point in time, we're talking about crisis, we're talking about emergencies, we're talking about people of every age, but particularly young people who are dying on the street, in their living room, and everywhere else. And Doug Ford wants to think about it. Give me a break.
To address the issue Chandra brought up earlier about crowded hospitals, the Green Party believes in taking what we have in healthcare and simply making it better. We would do this by investing directly into seniors. We would invest in home care programs so seniors could get the healthcare that they need in the comfort of their own home. We would invest in community centers in rural communities to help prevent congestion in local and urban hospitals.
So, Jeremy, if I understand you correctly, you're cutting 4% or $6 billion from the provincial budget, but you're not touching healthcare, which is the biggest part of the budget, which means you are actually cutting probably double that from every other single ministry.
What we're going to be focusing on, Chandra, is making sure that support is getting to the most vulnerable in our communities who have been severely left behind under this Liberal Kathleen Wynne
So you're
government.
not going to cut Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support Programs. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not. So cutting
You're not going to cut money from education, from our
cutting
kids,
support
from special
for
ed.
cutting support for individuals with disabilities is something that's a complete and total antithesis to what I stand for. I have a younger brother who has autism. This is an issue that is incredibly close to my heart, and I'm going to be fighting every single day to fight for those who are the most vulnerable, individuals
are you
with
going to cut?
addictions, individuals with disabilities. We're going to be finding efficiencies.
No, what are you going to cut? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be clear with
Quick
people.
answer on that, and then you have the final 30 seconds anyway. We might as well move to that. Maybe you can
sure.
respond to the question. and
We're
wrap
going
up.
to be taking a look at a number of different reports that have come out recently. The Auditor General found $1 billion worth of savings that we can find in the provincial government's budget without cutting a single job. We're going to go back to something Pat mentioned earlier, the Drummond Report, and see if there's some recommendations in there that can help us get our finances under control. We do not have to sacrifice our children and grandchildren's future by indebting them and continuing to pile more and more debt and interest payments on them in order to help those today. That's a false choice that the NDP is presenting.
All right, thank you. We are going to move to the next question now, which I will direct to Chandra Pasma, the NDP candidate. What can be done to support businesses that have already seen minimum wage increases and will see their taxes go up if the NDP forms a government?
Well, Mark, only very few businesses will see their taxes increase, and that's the wealthiest corporations, which we think can afford to pay their fair share. But the NDP has a plan to support small businesses. We intend to increase government procurement from small businesses. The Ontario government annually procures about $6 billion in goods and services from Ontario businesses, and we want to see that directed to small businesses so that they have the chance to get the leg up. We also have a comprehensive economic strategy to develop the Ontario economy focused on our different regional industries, including the resource sector, information technology, and manufacturing. And we're going to make life more affordable for the average Ontarian so that they actually have money to spend at local businesses instead of being too indebted to be able to do that.
All right, it's open to everyone now on jobs and the economy.
I'd like to jump in here if I can, and I think this issue in terms of jobs and supporting our small businesses is tied directly to one of the biggest problems facing us in this election, and that is the hydro crisis. The other day, I was outdoor knocking and I met a family over on Seymour Avenue, just east of Merivale. This family owned a lumber mill called Wood Source within Eastern Ontario. They were telling me that 10 years ago, their hydro rates were $3,200 per month. They've now jumped to over $9,000 each bill. At that rate, they told me they could have hired another couple employees at their business. This is a critical issue facing us, and Kathleen Wynne's government has woefully mismanaged this.
You have no solution. You have no solution.
I
You're
absolutely
talking about
agree,
you're
Bob.
talking about a 12% cut in your policy. 12% cut will cost you $3 billion a year. I know that for a fact. We've worked the numbers out. We did it before, previously,
I
et
believe
cetera.
the Conservative
And
Party
so-
has also
and-
mentioned cutting small business taxes
And
completely
so
out of the
$3
picture.
billion a year, where will you find that money? You're
Absolutely.
promising. The
So what we're gonna
NDP,
be
the
doing,
NDP is worse.
actually-
They're promising cuts of up to 30%. It's going to cost about $6 to $7 billion a year.
Yeah,
And Kathleen Wynne's
you won't
solution
afford
is to
that.
mortgage our
It's very
children's
easy-
futures
It's very easy to go
drop
out
the
with a
rates
banner
down
headline.
now.
You're going to cut 3% or 12%
That's the Kathleen
or
Wynne
30%.
solution.
And
The
the
Kathleen
reality
Wynne
is
solution
you can't do
is
it
to
because
send
there's
that
not
money
enough
down.
money there to do it.
One at
And
a
do you
time,
know
please.
why our hydro rates are so high? Because you guys privatized Hydro One. Because you introduced mandatory time of use premiums that didn't actually result in any conservation.
I'd like to bring
it's
the
your
discussion back to
management.
small businesses
Bringing
and what the
Hydro
government
One
plans
back
to do
into
for
public
small
hands
businesses.
is going to bring
The
down
reality
costs so
is
that we are no
if
longer
you
paying
compare-
profits to private corporations.
If you compare residential electricity rates in North America, we're in the middle of the pack. I'll tell you there are 4 or 5 cities in Canada who are provinces in Canada who have higher rates than we do.
Okay, I'm going to jump
so
in
you
because
can talk,
we are going to talk about electricity prices coming up in another segment. This is meant to be about jobs and the economy. I know there's a relationship between the two, but Patrick Friel, I think you were going to say something about related to jobs.
Thank you,
and
Mark.
small businesses.
I believe small businesses are crucial components to not only local economies, but local communities and the Ontario economy as a whole. The Green Party has a plan to help small businesses directly by increasing the employer health tax exemption up to $1 million and lowering payroll taxes for small businesses. This will directly relieve cash flow going into the business so they can be relieved of any impacts of the minimum wage hike, which the Green Party supports. And they will also be able to hire more local people and create more local jobs and help the economy that way.
we are cutting the small business tax by 20% in order to assist in this time of transition for minimum wage. We also have significant training programs for small businesses where they can get funding from the provincial government to do training, et cetera. And most small businesses have welcomed that very, very significantly. So we're not ignoring that particular issue, and we can talk about that when we get into energy as well, in terms of energy savings for small business.
I think Patrick's made some good points here in terms of there's 2 big issues facing small businesses today. On the one hand, there's the affordability side. We've already talked about hydro rates, taxes, different things that have driven up the cost for small businesses over the past 15 years, and it's causing them to struggle. But there's an equally important issue at play here, and that's regulations impacting small businesses. We need to make sure that we are decreasing the regulatory burden. That's why a PC government will be looking into different things like the one-for-one rule, a very successful initiative introduced at the federal level, whereby every time government introduces one new piece of regulation on businesses, we take another one away so that we aren't growing that regulatory burden and hurting our small businesses. Those 2 areas, affordability and making sure that we're reducing that regulatory burden, are 2 things that are incredibly important to a PC government.
I'd like to add to the Green Party's plan to increase the health tax exemption and lower payroll taxes. The party plans to compensate for any impact this would have on government revenues by reversing corporate tax cuts, and instead of making corporate tax cuts less for large corporations, we would actually increase the corporate tax rate by 0.5%.
Okay, why don't we wrap up there, and we'll go back to Chandra Pasma. You have the final 30 seconds on jobs and the economy.
Thank you, Mark. So the NDP is going to invest in our small businesses and make sure that they can grow. We're also going to make things easier for small businesses by making sure that their employees get the prescription drugs dental care, and health care that they need so that they have a healthy, well-educated workforce who doesn't have to be worried about their kids who will be in high-quality child care or education while they're at work, because helping people to work is how you grow an economy.
Okay, thank you. Next question for Green Party candidate Patrick Friel. 1 in 5 Ontario residents are struggling with a mental illness. What is your plan to help them and their families?
Great question, Mark. As I mentioned earlier, the Green Party has a plan to establish a Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, and will be directly investing $6 billion into these services so that people who are suffering the most can get the help that they need and in an effective way. Part of this plan would also include the merging of the Queensway Carleton database with the rest of Ontario's public health database. That way we can have streamlined patient information, and there's no need to create new files when moving in and out of the Queensway Carleton Hospital.
Okay, it's open to everyone on mental health.
I know a little bit about mental health. My late son suffered from schizophrenia. And I remember the ROH, before the ROH, the Royal Ottawa Hospital existed. And it was 5 generations ago, quality of mental health that we were getting in the city. One of the first things that we did in government when we came into government was build the Royal Ottawa Hospital. It's transformed mental health. It's been a champion of getting rid of stigma in the mental health community. We've also recently funded improvements to the mental health wing at the Queensway Carleton Hospital. We should be very proud of this city of ours because we were on the forefront of fighting that stigma. And in our budget, we put $2.1 billion for mental health over the next 4 years. That's almost 10 times the amount that Doug Ford has promised, because his is over 10 years. And that will go to frontline service. It will go to provide those people who need doctors immediately. It will provide for counseling, psychotherapy. A lot of us dedicated to that.
Yeah.
I think we're all on the same page when it comes to the importance of that. And I think this is an issue that we ought not to be criticizing each other for, because we're all very, very strong on this issue. We're supporting it in one way or another, and I think that's good news for Ottawa and good news for Ontario.
Sure, and absolutely, I agree with Bob that this is obviously something I think many of us are passionate about, and of course I commend Bob for being on the front lines of fighting for the Royal Ottawa Hospital. But part of the issue is that we need to make sure that services are keeping up with the demands and the complex growing demands that are facing our community. I was on the phone yesterday with a lady named Brenda Reich. Brenda has a son who has special needs, who's 25 years old. Her son Ian and I actually went to school together. And for the past 10 months, Ian has been in the Royal Ottawa Hospital, and basically he is not getting the treatment he needs because Ottawa's Champagne LHIN is the only LHIN across Ontario that has no beds for dual diagnosis patients. These are patients with complex needs. It might be autism and a mental illness. It might be a developmental disability and something else. And our LHIN is the only one without it. There was a report that came out in 2014 that recommended that we needed at least 16 beds here. We have none. These are the sorts of things that we need to make sure we're keeping up with as a province. And a Doug Ford government, a PC government, we're going to fight to make sure that those investments are there for our most vulnerable. Folks like Ian shouldn't have to be sitting there basically being sedated on a day-to-day basis because the capacity isn't there to give him the treatment. That's not a life for anyone. And so our plan is to build upon the successful work that's been done already, but get it to that next level where we absolutely need it most to help folks like the Reiches and others.
I think we can also agree that children...
I have no confidence that Mr. Ford will be able to solve this issue because he lacks the sensitivity. You can't, this is something that is fact. This is a quote from Mr. Ford. When he was on City Council and they wanted to build a group home for autism, this is the quote. This is what came out of his mouth. You can't destroy a community like this. People have worked 30 years for their home. My heart goes out to kids with autism, but no one told me they would be leaving the house. If it comes down to it, I'll buy the house myself and resell it. That's not the
Bob,
value.
I'd like
that's
to
not
ask
the
you a
val-
direct
That's not the
question,
value
if I
of a
could.
premier.
Bob, I'd like to ask you a direct question, if I could. Do you think that supporting families with children with autism is something that I, as a candidate, care deeply about?
Absolutely.
Yes. Political parties are teams. There is no doubt about that. Every single political party that forms government is a team. It's never just one person. And that's why, as a PC government, we're going to have a number of different people who are highly skilled. Folks like Christine Elliott, who has been at the forefront of fighting for individuals with developmental disabilities. We have a wonderful candidate in Mississauga who sits on the school board there, has 2 children with developmental disabilities. And I myself, as I mentioned earlier, got involved in politics to help my younger brother Dylan, who has autism. Doug might need to learn as he goes about some of these issues, and I've already taken steps to meet with him and introduce him to folks like Autism Speaks and the Ontario Community Living Association. We're going to work with those groups and figure out these solutions because we can't afford to not deal with them anymore. We've had 15 years where a lot of these issues have not been dealt with. And
I'm
that's
sorry,
a priority
Jeremy.
for us.
I really appreciate your concern for your brother, and I really believe that you care deeply about people with autism, but I just have a hard time believing you're going to convince Doug Ford when he thinks they're children with violent tendencies. But I just want to talk about children and mental health for a moment, since mental health is our subject right now. I think we can all agree that that should be a priority for us, because kids who are diagnosed with a mental health problem are more likely to have a mental health problem as an adult. But right now, those kids are waiting far too long to get the services that they need. The NDP will invest in mental health care so that no child has to wait more than 30 days to see a mental health professional. And we will hire many more mental health counselors to work in high schools, which is kind of the front line of the mental health crisis in Ontario right now. We want to
Okay.
get those kids help when they need it.
That's time. We're going to go back to Patrick Friel. You get the final 30 seconds on this topic.
Thanks, Mark. Chandra brings up a good point in the sense that we need to be investing in our kids in order to tackle mental health as a whole. I'm sporting a painted nail tonight in support of abused children to help bring awareness to their situation. And I think the Green Party has a good plan to invest in children, in mental health, so that we can grow as a community and have a healthier community as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Bob Shirelli, the Liberal Party candidate. Many Ontario voters believe that by privatizing Hydro One, your party created the conditions that led to higher salaries for the executives and board members of Hydro One. How do you intend to fix the compensation issue and address rising electricity prices now that the government no longer controls the majority of shares?
First of all, the salary issue has been demonstrated by many people who've commented with experience in the electricity sector that does not impact on the price of electricity. The initiative that we took to spread the ownership of Hydro One around was based primarily on realizing on that asset the amount that was raised by disposing of a little over half put $5 billion towards the province's debt, and it instantly reduced our interest costs as well. It put $4 billion.
I'm going to open it up to everyone. You can carry on, and then other people can jump in. But
I'd like to point out that none of the other parties have a plan for renewable energy. There are crazy rumors going around that renewable energy is expensive. I often hear examples of Germany being a failed renewable energy project, but Germany is a country and Ontario is a province, and Germany's population comes nowhere near to that of the small population of Canada, let alone Ontario. The Green Party wants to invest in renewable energy and invest in energy-efficient homes so that we can directly reduce hydro prices that way.
That's actually not true, Patrick. The NDP has a plan to prioritize renewable energy as we move forward. What we want to do is move away from the Liberal contracts, which provide expensive profits to private companies, whether or not they actually create any energy, and whether or not that energy actually gets used by Ontarians. We are exporting expensive hydro that Ontarians are paying for to the United States, which is getting that at cutthroat rates. In fact, we've been sold a bill of goods. The Liberals told us that privatization was going to make hydro cheaper. And since they privatized Hydro One, rates have gone up 300%. Bob said we're not doing too bad in the scale of North America. Well, you know who has the cheapest hydro in North America? Manitoba and Quebec, which both have a public system. So what we're going to do is take Hydro One back into public ownership, because that's the way you deliver cheaper hydro at a more consistent quality with a strong plan for our province that relies on renewable energy.
Chandra's right on an important point there, and that's the failure of these Liberal contracts under the Green Energy Act. Reducing hydro prices is the #1 priority for a PC government. This is something that I hear about time and time again at the doors. The other day I was over on Valley Ridge in one of the condo buildings there, met a woman named Diane. She used to have a lovely home out in Embrum. Her hydro prices got so high she had to move away, sell her home, and move into an apartment. Now, we are thrilled that Diane chose Ottawa West-Nepean to settle because this is a wonderful community, but she shouldn't have had to make that choice. Now, we've got a couple of ideas here in terms of how we are going to get those rates down, both in the short term and over the long term. Number one, we're going to take the conservation fee that is included in part of your hydro bill and take that out of your hydro bill. We think that that's something that should be dealt with through general taxation. That's going to cause a decrease in your bill. Second of all, we are going to return the dividends from Hydro One back to consumers to help put a dent in your costs. Third of all, we are going to stop signing any more of these ridiculous, ludicrously expensive contracts. We are currently producing a surplus of electricity in Ontario with declining demand. There is no need to be building more of these windmills and solar panels at this time. And in the future, if we end up needing new sources of electricity, there is a wonderful source of electricity right next to us in Quebec in hydropower, which is GHG emission free and is being sold at a much cheaper rate. They're selling it to the New England states at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. That is much lower than we are having to pay here in Ontario.
Not true. Not true. As Minister of Energy, on the request of the Premier of this province, I and the Ministry of Energy and IESO were negotiating with Quebec. We're still at the table with Quebec. We've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. We have agreements with Quebec. But on the price of electricity, they will charge us the highest price they can possibly charge. And it is not that cheap to the U.S. The reality is that we worked so hard at that issue, and Quebec said there's no way we can deliver electricity to Ontario at less a price than you can generate it yourself. That's a fact, and it's verified in all kinds of minutes from the different agencies from both provinces.
Frankly, this just reminds us again, the Liberal government should have been starting these negotiations back at the start. The fact that they went down this route with the Green Energy Act and these expensive contracts, which, as Chandra reminded us, are filled with different things that cause the cost to go up.
What we did at the start, what we did at the very start, was start getting rid of dirty coal generation. I was the minister who shut down the last coal-burning plant. There was 52% of our generation was coming from coal. We had medical officer of health alerts in Toronto and Ottawa, smog days where people were asked to stay indoors. You don't see that anymore because we have a 96% emissions-free system in Ontario. It's the best in the world. Nobody can compete with us in terms of clean air because we got rid of coal generation.
And then the next thing that you did, Bob, was to borrow against hydro's future so that my kids will have to pay for consumers to have lower bills now so that the Liberal Party can potentially get a few votes.
What we did
Instead
was,
of having a real plan
take
lower hydro bills by making
25%.
Hydro One public again.
We took 25% off the bill, so those people that he was mentioning, that Jeremy was mentioning, would be able to get a big discount.
And
in the
instead of
rural
doing
areas,
it through
Embrum, where she
public ownership, which would have worked.
And Embrum was a rural area where the costs were higher, and those prices now, as a result of what we did with the new pricing
By
scheme,
mortgaging their children's future.
And instead of doing it through public ownership, which would have worked, you borrowed from Hydro One so that my children will have to pay it off someday, and you hid the debt so that the Auditor General had to chastise you publicly for not declaring Ontario's
That's just not
debt.
true.
Instead
That's
of
not
generating
true.
more
Not
electricity
true.
and
That was
finding
the- that was-
energy alternatives to reduce hydro bills, we should be focusing on how to reduce our energy consumption. We need to be investing in a plan, investing in a fund for green buildings and green businesses so that homeowners and business owners can directly reduce their hydro bills, so that we can increase tourism in the cities by by having renewable energy in the cities.
We've already spent $2 billion towards that type of conservation through the cap and trade program. The revenues we get from cap and trade, every dollar that goes to conservation retrofit programs, that's $2 billion. And it's much more than any conservation program that's existed before. It's working, and it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we have 96%.
We're out of time, but it's your question, so you get the final 30 seconds anyway, so carry on.
Well, when we took over the electricity sector from the Conservative government, they had bankrupted Ontario Hydro. They had to break up Ontario Hydro into different pieces. $18 billion of that debt went onto our electricity rates. That's what the Conservative government did. And we had to fix it. We had to take that burden. We had to rebuild the system. We rebuilt it by getting rid of coal. It put some pressure on prices, but now we have 96% emission-free electricity.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question, which I'll direct to Jeremy Roberts, the Progressive Conservative candidate. Your party has promised to scrap the sex education curriculum in Ontario. First of all, what's wrong with it, and what would you replace it with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. This is a very important issue for parents, and I think it's important for folks at home to completely understand the PC government position. And that position is that we do not feel that parents were adequately consulted in this process. And for something as important as sex education in the school, if parents aren't involved, we're doing something wrong. This means that we are going to reopen it and see what views there are out there. That means listening to some parents from faith communities. It also means listening to healthcare professionals. I met a doctor over in Crystal Beach the other day. She fought hard so that there would be a section included to teach young women how to check for lumps on their breasts. That was never included. There was no consultation process involved in this that parents felt was worthwhile.
Okay.
And
It's
so
open to
that's what
everyone
we're
now
gonna
on
do.
this topic.
I think I'm the only one here who actually has kids in school.
And children?
As a parent, I feel adequately consulted. I approve of what my kids are learning. I think it's age appropriate, and as their parent, I get regularly informed about what they're learning. I think sex education needed to be updated from what it was when I was a kid. There's dangers now that didn't exist back when I was a kid, like sexting, and quite frankly, my sex education didn't deal adequately with things like consent that I'm glad my kids are learning about. And I'm actually a parent from a faith community, so I think it's a bit of a distraction to say that faith communities are worried about this. In fact, I think this whole thing is a distraction. I think it's a partisan distraction to get people angry and afraid instead of talking about the changes we actually need to be making in education, which is to invest in our schools and make sure that we actually have enough teachers and educational assistants to teach our children, to make sure we're addressing the backlog of repairs that need to be made, that we're fixing our crumbling schools, that kids don't have to go to school in a building that's not equipped for extreme weather, like my kids do, so that they come home exhausted and tired every time there's a really hot day. This is a distraction, and I don't see any conservative plan to actually fix what's wrong with education. All I see that you're putting on the table is cuts. And what I want to know, Jeremy, is what are you going to cut from education, especially if it's going to be more than a 4% cut? I want to know, as a parent, which schools in Ottawa West-Nepean are you going to close? Which teachers are you going to fire? What are you going to take away from my kids and other kids? Are you going to take away their textbooks? Are you going to take away their field trips? Are you going to take away their educational opportunities? What are you going to cut? Be upfront with parents and tell us, what are you going to cut?
Yeah, there's a three-part plan in terms of education, in terms of my priorities and the PC Party's priorities. Number one is we want to take a look at the entire curriculum, top to bottom, and see what needs to be updated to reflect changes that have happened in the past 15 years. So that includes areas such as what needs to be added. I would love to see financial literacy brought in a large scale into the schools. I'd love to see more trades brought into the schools, computer programming. We also need to look at what needs to be improved. I think all of us up here at the stage would agree that our math scores need to get up to par, which they aren't today. And lastly, are there some things that are perhaps outdated that we need to take a look at and get better? I've heard from numerous teachers across the riding who are concerned that we need to take a look at EQAO and see what are the issues with this standardized test. Are there ways to improve it? So that's going to be our approach, is saying, listen, we've had 15 years of one party in power, and they have presented a vision, Now we're going to have a change in government. Now what we need to do is see if there are areas that we need to improve. And in doing so, we're going to consult parents, number one, and teachers
A
as well.
curriculum review is fine, Jeremy. The NDP is going to review our curriculum too. It needs to be done. It hasn't been done in a while. But my question was, what are you going to cut? What are you going to take away from our schools? Which schools are you going to close? And which teachers are you going to fire?
Yeah, we're not going to be closing
here's
any
the
schools in
philosophy-
Ottawa
the
West.
How are you
philosophy
going to
of
cut
Doug-
And we're not
more
going
than
to
$1
be
billion
cutting any
from the
teachers.
The
education
philosophy
system
of Doug
and not
Ford-
close a single
the
school
philosophy
or lay off
of
a
Doug
single
Ford-
We
teacher.
have never said that we are cutting $1 billion from
We
the
are
education
already
philosophy
in a
of-
situation
That's putting
where
money in.
teachers
The
philosophy
are buying
of- the
supplies
philosophy
out their
of
own
Doug Ford-
pockets, where
Absolutely.
our schools have water damage that can't be fixed. They're crumbling. They're not getting the repairs they need. You said you're going to cut 4% across the board, and apparently that excludes healthcare. 4% of education is $1 billion. If you need to cut more than 4% to make up for the fact that you're protecting healthcare, that's probably $2 billion.
We're going
So
to be
what are you
finding
going to cut?
efficiencies across the
You cannot
board,
find
Chandra.
efficiencies in an underfunded education system of $2 billion.
There's
So
always
I think
ways
you
to
should
make
be
systems
upfront
more
How
with
much
parents.
efficiencies
As a
can you
parent,
find?
I want to know,
How
what are
much-
you going to cut?
How much efficiencies can you find in the $50 or $60 billion budget? The reality is, to get the type of money that you want, that you need, I think you've already got $8 billion of new spending out there in front of you. You cannot do that without making significant cuts to the largest ministries, which are education and healthcare. And if you want to know what Doug Ford's philosophy is, it was stated on 980 AM radio in London. We'd never leave any commitment. We're going to review everything. Nothing is going untouched. Not everything's going to be reviewed. Nothing is going untouched. He's going to come in with a bulldozer, and he's used the words, and he does things secretly. He does things bully-wise, and he's making himself a menace as a potential candidate for premier of this province.
It's unfortunate today that what we're hearing is a lot of fear-mongering from some of the other parties up here. Let me ask you a question. Are you frustrated by the fact that whenever you ask a politician, what are you going to do to solve X? Let's pick an issue at random. What are you doing to help lower youth unemployment? The typical answer you get from a politician is, we're going to spend $20 million to solve youth unemployment. That doesn't tell us anything. A Doug Ford government, a PC government, a government that I am fighting to be part of, is going to switch the mentality. We're going to start to talk about impact and making sure that every single one of your government dollars are going to good use. We're going to start saying, okay, we're going to invest $20 million over 3 years to lower it by 23%. I'm throwing figures out here at random.
I'd like to actually squeeze in a
This
quick word.
is an area where after 3 years, if there hasn't been a marked drop, a marked impact, we're going to take that money and invest it elsewhere because we can't afford to be loose with our money. We're the
Okay.
most indebted province in the entire
I
world.
want to give other people a chance to get in because you get the final 30 seconds anyway. Go
Jeremy,
ahead.
we're not fear-mongering. What I am saying to you is the fear that I am hearing from voters at the door who are telling me they are terrified about what you and your party are going to cut because you are not being honest and you are not being transparent and you are not telling people what you are going to cut. You are only saying that cuts are coming, and people deserve to know in advance what they're voting for and what they're going to lose if they vote for you in the PC government.
All right, you get the final 30 seconds so you can respond to that or finish up on this issue.
It's interesting. Perhaps Chandra and I are talking to different people at the door. What I'm hearing from people at the door in this riding is that people are afraid about what we're going to do with this growing amount of debt. And frankly, we are the only party, the PC party, that has put forward a plan to get our finances back in order. We're going to get our budget balanced in the short term and start paying down that debt. Right now, every child that is born at the Queensway Carleton Hospital has $21,000 of debt on their shoulders. That's unfair.
All right, let's stop there and move on to the next question, which I will direct to Chandra Pasma, the NDP candidate, and actually it follows on the theme of the last portion of that discussion. You've talked about lowering hydro rates and spending money in areas like healthcare and childcare. How can we afford all of that when we already have a deficit and an enormous debt in the province of Ontario?
Thanks, Mark. The NDP's fiscal plan is based on 3 principles. Number 1, we're going to invest in programs and services that benefit everyone instead of vote buying and backroom deals. Number 2, We're going to fund those investments sustainably so that we get away from this pattern of cuts and freezes that we've had under Liberal and Conservative governments. And number 3, in order to fund those investments, we're going to protect low and middle income families from being squeezed, and we're going to ask the wealthiest people and the wealthiest corporations to pay their fair share in exchange for the services they receive which make them successful. We're also going to engage in a number of tax fairness measures, and we're going to increase taxes on the tobacco. Sorry.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
Okay, I would like to talk about this particular subject. In the last 40 years, there have been 8 balanced budgets in Ontario, 5 Liberal, 3 Conservatives. Under Bill Davis, who is recognized as one of the most responsible premiers in the modern history of this province, Conservative, he served for 14 years, and he never had one balanced budget. The other thing is, the issue of debt and deficits is a matter of whether they are responsible or not. And I believe that we're doing it responsibly. We have a very small deficit after balancing this budget, and we're investing in childcare, seniors care, health care, etc., and we're prepared to go into a small deficit in order to do it. I think that's the type of thing that Bill Davis did without ever balancing the budget. So it's important that we keep that in mind. In terms of debt, it's relevant to a number of things. The interest on debt expense is now 8 cents on every dollar of revenue, compared to 15 cents under Mike Harris. So that measure, Mike Harris was more irresponsible than we were because of that type of relationship between revenue and debt and deficit. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Bob, you're sending some mixed messages here. So on your piece of campaign literature, I happened to notice a piece on the ground the other day, and it said right on there, it said, "I am proud that we balanced this year's budget." And when I showed somebody this, they burst out laughing. You're telling us here that you think we need to be spending more. Then why are you proud of balanced budgets? Why do you think balanced budgets are important for a government to run?
It's part of the sequence of events that occur. We came out of the recession. Federal government had $54 billion in debt. The province had $23 billion in debt. We boosted our spending because we needed it. We needed it to keep the economy going. We needed it to support the automobile industry, etc. So we had a target. We said, rather than try to cut, and reduce it quickly, we had a target of 6 years. This is a 6th year, and we balanced it. Now we're going into a deficit again. It's not coming out of a recession, but what we have now is tremendous inequities in our society, where we have a booming economy and people are getting left behind. And it's time now for us to dig in the well and help these people who need help. For example, $2.1 billion for mental illness. We had a choice. We could have eliminated that deficit or reduced that deficit or spend the money on mental health. And we decided to do that.
And you had another choice, Bob, which is that instead of going deeper into deficit to spend that money on mental health, you could have asked the wealthiest to pay their fair share. Because we are a province of haves and have-nots, and it's completely fair to ask the wealthiest to pay a bit more in order to make sure that we look after everyone and leave no one behind.
Frankly, Bob said it himself. I mean, I don't think he fully followed his argument through, but deficit spending is a cyclical thing. You want to spend in deficit when the economy is down to help boost it, to help get it back on its feet. Our economy is not currently in recession. There is no need for us to be spending that amount of money and adding that burden further onto our children and grandchildren. We're going to take a responsible approach. We're going to get our budget balanced in the short term, start paying off that deficit. Because right now, when you see every single Ontarian holding $21,000 of debt on their shoulders, that's $100,000 for every single family of 4 that you're holding as your own personal burden. My mentor, the late Jim Flaherty, brought fiscal common sense to Canada, and frankly, I think we need to be bringing that back into Ontario as well.
But voters know that your fiscal plan doesn't make sense either, Jeremy. You guys are going to cut 4% from the budget. You're going to fund these expensive investments in things like mental health and transit. You're going to give wealthy people a tax cut. You're going to give wealthy corporations a tax cut. So where's the plan to balance the budget here? You're actually going to have to cut more than 4%. So where's your plan? Where's your costed plan so that people can see what you're actually going to cut to pay for those things?
Part of
Chandra
this
knows
debate,
this very well.
part of this debate is the value system as well, in terms of, you talked about, you do deficit spending when there are, certain circumstances, et cetera. We have a circumstance now in economies around the world. The wealth is going to the top. Okay, and there are a lot of people in the bottom who are not sharing in strong economy. Ontario is one of the strongest economies, and there's a lot of money being made in the corporate sector and other places, but there are still circumstances where there's perhaps not enough money for autism or not enough money for drugs. That's why we brought in the youth and child drug program, et cetera, because some people, because of the nature of our economies around the world, are not able to maintain what is normal.
Well,
and so we come
flip
to the
this
table.
around, then.
We come to the table and we exercise a value. Okay, you have a value. Okay, that you want to reduce debt and you want to reduce deficit, etc. I have a value that if you have debt and deficit responsibly implemented, then help people who need it. That's where we differ.
And no, I mean, frankly, if you look at all of the numbers, that just is blatantly false. The Kathleen Wynne government spending all of this money, most indebted province in the world. We're one of the highest tax jurisdictions in North America, and our services are not keeping up to par. We are missing 35,000 seniors long-term care beds across the province. Here in Ottawa, our seniors long-term care facilities, over 50% are deemed medium to high safety risks for their inhabitants. Individuals with disabilities are falling further behind. This is something my family has dealt with. And wait times in Ontario have hit an all-time high in the past decade.
And yes, that's
All
part
of
of what
these
our deficit is
services
supporting.
Are going down,
that deficit
and yet
is
you've been
supporting
spending
long-term
all
care.
of this money for 15 years.
deficit-
Where are the results?
That deficit
Where
is
are
supporting
Kathleen Wynne's
long-term care.
results?
And your only plan is to come in and cut. You recognize that all these needs exist,
We're
but you're
gonna
not
find
prepared to spend.
efficiencies.
Yeah, efficiencies. Another word for efficiencies is
In
cuts.
fact, your party on page 97 of your budget, you commit to finding $3.9 billion of efficiencies. What does efficiencies mean to the NDP?
Efficiencies means eliminating areas of wasteful spending where we can.
Absolutely. Completely agree. That's our exact plan
Okay.
as well. We're going to be finding the ways
gonna
to
wrap
get
up now.
support to the most vulnerable.
Chandra Pasma, you get the final 30 seconds on this topic.
What you're hearing here today is three very different fiscal plans. One is a plan that will invest in the services people need, but rather than asking those who can afford it to pay a little bit more to pay for those services, it's going to go deeper into debt. Another is going to make dramatic cuts to the kinds of services and programs that people badly need. The NDP plan is a balanced plan that will provide investments in services that people need and will ask the wealthiest people and corporations to pay their fair share to sustainably fund those investments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in the debate. We are going to move now to the closing statements. Once again, we'll do these in the reverse order of the opening statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute, and we'll begin with Liberal Party candidate Bob Chiarelli.
Thank you, Mark. We made a deliberate choice to invest in care, health care, child care, and seniors care. And as a result, we have a small deficit, less than 1% of GDP. But interest on debt expense is now 8 cents on every dollar of revenue, compared with 15 cents under Mike Harris. Achieving the lowest interest on debt to revenue ratio in 25 years enables the province to spend more revenue on programs that directly impact on the people of Ontario and our city. We did the hard work to bring the budget to balance, and right now we need to invest in the infrastructure, healthcare, education, and other important services that people rely on. We're making prescription drugs free for children and youth and for seniors. We're investing in free tuition, childcare, mental health, and more infrastructure. I am a proven fighter for you, the people of my riding and the City of Ottawa, and I ask for your vote.
All right, thank you. Next is Patrick Friel, the Green Party candidate. Go ahead.
I've been volunteering with the Green Party for 5 years now. I started out just as a canvasser for the Alex Hill campaign, but now I hold the positions of a federal treasurer and provincial president of my local riding associations. Being only 21 years old, I believe my learning curve is at its peak, and I want to be a part of the system and improve it as my own skills improve. I'm surrounded by great people, and I want to represent an even greater community in the Ontario legislature. Green policies will always consider people, profit, and planet, and will never put one above the other. This is the foundations of sustainable business, and the government should be a leader in sustainable business practices. I'm not here representing a party or a party leader with a history shrouded in controversy or recklessness. I am here representing the need for effective and efficient governance. I am here representing a generation of up-and-comings. I am here representing people-powered progress. This election, vote Pat Friel for the Green Party of Ontario.
Thank you. Next is Chandra Pasma, the NDP candidate. Go ahead.
This election is about change. I hear that every day from voters at the door. People are tired of a government that doesn't have their best interests at heart. They're tired of cuts and privatization and empty promises. They're tired of scandals and mismanagement. And I get it. I'm tired of it too. But Doug Ford's cuts will only make things worse. And he's going to double down on privatization. Only the NDP has a comprehensive plan to make life better for you and your family. We will fix health care. We will make childcare more affordable. We'll make sure that every senior can live in dignity and respect. We'll make post-secondary education more affordable. And as part of Andrea Horwath's government, I will fight hard for you and your family every single day at Queen's Park. Because you deserve better. You deserve a representative that's in your corner. It's time for a fresh face in Ottawa West-Nepean. It is time for change.
All right, thank you. Finally, Jeremy Roberts, the Progressive Conservative Party candidate. Go ahead.
Sure. I'd like to start by thanking you, Mark, for moderating this debate. I think it's been a wonderful exchange of ideas. And also, I'd like to thank my fellow candidates for a truly spirited discussion of the ideas today. I think what we've seen tonight is clearly two different visions for the future of Ontario. And so what I'd like to ask you to do is when you go into the ballot box on election day, ask yourself this question. Do you want life to continue to get more expensive, or do you want life to get more affordable? Because I think those are the clear options that are in front of us. Either we continue spending more, which will require higher taxes, and continue to see services decline as they have over the past number of years, or we choose a more affordable future where we'll get our hydro rates down, get our taxes down, and start to put a bit more money back in your pocket. I'm Jeremy Roberts. I hope I can count on your support.
All right, thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in our debate, and best of luck to you in the rest of the campaign. I want to remind our viewers that we will have live local election coverage the night the results come in on Election Day on June the 7th. Our telecast on Rogers TV and our broadcast on 1310 News will start at 9 o'clock when the polls close. Thank you for watching the local campaign.